Good afternoon. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about body tension in the handstand, some of the common cues, some of the common misconceptions, and basically how to treat it depending on what you're trying to use the handstand for. And as always, this is based on my own personal experience and observation in performing handstands and teaching them, so you're always welcome to take it with a grain of salt, and please find out for yourself, question what I do, and if you find out that it resonates with you, then that's fantastic, and if you find out that you disagree, that's also fantastic. Nothing wrong with either. So you'll hear in a gymnastics class, and you'll hear this cue a lot in the handstand world of, squeeze your butt, ears to your shoulders, everything tight, tight core, brace. And I think a lot of times, especially in the adult community, when they're trying to just learn handstands for the sake of handstands, building so much body tension can actually be a little bit counterproductive when it comes to the skill work. But as I said, of course, it depends on what you use the handstand for. So I'm going to say why I will prefer to use a more loose handstand, a more relaxed handstand, and then I'll explain why the tension is also important depending on the situation. So, first of all, I try to treat the idea of a handstand as an extension of if we were standing on our feet. So think about it, how much body tension do you need in order to stand? You need some, of course, because whatever, tensegrity model and all of that, there is a certain amount of body tension that holds you up. However, if you stand vertically and you're stacked on top of your joints, you really don't need to engage a lot of your musculature to be able to stand. And more so than that, if you are focused on squeezing, if you are very tense, it's more difficult to make a reaction. So if I'm standing and I'm loose and you push me over, I can do this kind of reaction to catch my balance. Whereas if I'm overly tense, it actually makes me slower and prevents me from making this kind of reaction. So that's one reason why I prefer a loose handstand. The second one is, again, I'm trying to use a very similar learning process in teaching the handstand as the process that we use in learning to stand on our feet. And if you watch a baby or a toddler learning to stand on their feet, they intuitively know what they need to do without being taught because it's ingrained in our biology. And what you'll see them do is grip the floor very hard with their feet. But you will not see a toddler, squeeze the abs, squeeze the butt. You're not going to see them get overly tense. The tension that you're going to see is they're going to be trying to stand vertically to lift themselves and not fall, forwards, backwards, sideways. And you're going to see them grip the floor with the feet to create that connection with the floor to maintain their balance. So the actual balance in both the feet and the handstand itself, it doesn't come from body tension. It doesn't come from squeezing the glutes or bracing the abs. It comes from controlling with the hands where the body is falling and then righting ourselves in that way. So another reason why I prefer to teach a more relaxed handstand position is that the idea of where your focus goes. And realistically, if you're learning a physical skill, especially one like a handstand where there is a fear element involved, you can only put your focus realistically on one thing at a time. So what I see quite a lot as well in the realm of adults is that people who are overly focused on tensing their body, it actually takes focus away from their balance, which if the goal is to hold a handstand, it's the hands that are going to be balancing you and not the body. So I feel that when they try to squeeze their butt, they try to squeeze their abs, the focus goes away from the actual balance and it actually, withholds. It actually hinders the progress that they might be making. So another reason that I prefer the loose handstand is that the handstand is a skill. So it's about kind of selective tension is what I like to call it. You need to have some amount of tension in your body. In the handstand specifically, most of that tension is going to be in your shoulders because that's what holds you up as long as your arms are straight, as long as your body is in line. It's the shoulders that need to carry the most tension. And even that, how much tension you need in your shoulders is still not a black and white issue, but you do have to push somewhat. But the rest of the body can be very loose if the shoulders, are in the right position. But the point is that I'm treating the handstand as a skill. And one of the goals for my idea of skill progressions is that you make it as easy as possible physically so that you can perform it, you can put in more reps, you can train more. So if I have more of a relaxed handstand, it allows me to be able to do more repetitions, and then eventually I can get to higher level skills like one-arm handstand, which require insane amounts of volume. So if I'm wasting energy by tensing my body when I don't need to be, it will make it more difficult to move into those more advanced skills. Also, a lot of times the tension generated in our body, especially in a skill like the handstand, is an element from the fear response. So we get scared, we tense up in an idea to try to protect ourselves. And as you know, if you were one of those people who were scared of going upside down or going over the top, you know that in this case the tension is not your friend, and tensing the body like that will actually hold you back from from more successful movements and also from more fluid and more smooth movements. The other thing is that overly tensing the body will modify the breathing, and it will make the breathing harder. And again, thinking of the handstand as a skill, you want to be able to relax your breathing, and you want to be able to circulate your breathing and not stop at any point, because it's not a strength-based skill. So another reason to be more relaxed is that the breathing becomes more continuous, and it just becomes easier to do the handstand. And body language from an outside perspective, it just looks better, it looks smoother, it looks more fluid when someone is relaxed going in and out of the positions as opposed to tensing up. It makes it look easier and feel easier. Now, I also had a really interesting experience pretty recently where in capoeira class, I took a kick to the face and it opened up a pretty big cut above my eye. I ended up having to get stitches, and while this cut was healing, I couldn't really go upside down for a week. And when I came back to the training of being upside down, I found out that the first few days I could only hold handstand for a couple seconds max before I started to feel pressure in the cut. So I had to really play with relaxing my body, and I found that the more relaxed I was, the more precise I was with my entries, the longer I was able to hold it. Whereas if I tensed up too much, if I overbalanced and had to use strength to correct myself, I instantly felt more pressure in the head. So I think this idea of relaxation also transcends to people who, I've had these complaints. I've never had this personally, but I've had people complain about headaches from handstands or burst blood vessels in the eye. So I think that's another important idea here, is that the more relaxed you are, the less physically draining that skill is going to be, especially from negative issues like what I just mentioned. So these are all points of why you should relax more in a handstand. Now, that doesn't mean that necessarily when you're learning it, you can be completely loose and floppy, but it means that as a skill, if you know the positioning, you don't have to be nearly as tense as what you think, and maybe as what you've heard different cues or different teachers tell you. And again, this is my personal opinion based on my own experience. And then one more point, this is more geared towards details in teaching adults in my own experience, is that people mistake positional cues for body tension cues. So I do teach a posterior pelvic tilt in a handstand, right, which looks like this. I don't need to, so to me that is not the same as tensing my abs. To me, the idea of tensing my abs would be, to brace for a punch. And sometimes people confuse that, but when I do this, I'm not tensing my abs, I'm just tilting my pelvis. So the same thing, if I cue somebody legs together, I just want contact between the legs. I don't necessarily want, squeeze a quarter in between your butt cheeks. So I think a lot of times, and I think also it comes, adults who are learning gymnastic skills that come from a weightlifting background, where it's all about generating tension to lift a heavier weight. So you have to remember that the handstand is not a strength movement, and it's important not to confuse that idea of a positional cue versus a body tension cue. I don't need to brace my abs to tilt my pelvis. I don't need to squeeze my butt to keep my legs together. Yeah, it's just another, I guess, area of confusion, because those cues are not the same, and I can have a completely straight handstand and still be very, very relaxed in my body, with the exception of a couple places that need to be tense to just hold my weight. So to continue with this personally, when I'm in a handstand, and that regardless of whether that's one arm, two arms, whatever, my main focus and the bulk of my awareness goes into what's happening in my hands, because that gives me pretty much feedback for everything else, and that's what actually balances me. So I can tense my body, of course, if I want to, but I feel no benefit from that when it comes to just balancing a handstand. So this is going to be the hand balancing handstand. So if having excess body tension is not useful in the handstand, then why do so many people tell us to use it? Well, a lot of the common knowledge of the handstand comes from, of course, the sport of gymnastics. Handstand is a very big part of gymnastics, and typically in gymnastics, so when they do the handstand, they're not just holding it static, right? So for a hand balancing handstand, for the most part, it's pretty much just a static force of your body weight, in which case you don't necessarily need a lot of body tension because the force is relatively small, it's static, and it's something you can easily take with the structure of your body. However, in gymnastics, they do a lot of dynamic movements where they pass through the handstand, but they pass through it sometimes with forces much greater than body weight. And examples would be, a tumbling pass, where they do fast back handsprings, a giant swing, either on rings or the bar. There's a lot more force in that than the body weight, so it's important to stay a lot tighter. The other reason that the gymnastics teaches the tense handstand is that they teach kids, right? It's a sport that people start as kids before they progress, and kids are usually naturally very loose and floppy, so it's difficult to teach the form of a good handstand to a kid by saying, oh, you have to posteriorly tilt your pelvis. Some of the easier things to do is just to say stay tight, and through that body tension the kids figure out the positions a lot faster, because it'll be a topic for another video, but basically kids can bypass the learning process of consciously learning something. Kids don't have to consciously learn or understand something to be able to achieve that skill at a very high level. So this is kind of where a lot of these cues come from, but the thing is, for adults, they need a lot more conscious understanding, and the reality is that tension is not always something we want. So if you are training gymnastics, if you are training dynamic skills, you have to squeeze, you have to. And the other reason that the pushing out so much is that sometimes you want to push out just in case to have a buffer of pulling in, right? If you're doing a dynamic movement and your shoulders are all the way sunken in, then the pressure can go straight to the joint, which is also something we don't want. So this is that idea of tension versus relaxation and why we would use both. And as I say, there's no right or wrong answer. Honestly, the answer is purely individual and purely situational. So I personally, when I'm balancing a handstand, I try to stay very loose because I want to do more repetitions, I want to focus on the balance, I want to make it look easy, and I don't need the tension. In gymnastics-based movements, the body tension, especially at specific points in the movement where you take a lot of force, is important. So staying tight and learning how to squeeze is very important, not only for safety, but also for skill progression and for aesthetics. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense as to why we might use a loose handstand or prefer a loose and relaxed handstand versus a tense handstand. And to reiterate, for the purposes of a handstand for hand balancing, for developing the handstand itself, I find that less body tension is better. Know where you need to be tense and then try to relax everything else, because it will save energy, it will improve your breathing, it will overall make the skill better and help you to progress in that skill. So if you want to learn more about my process in learning hand balancing, check out the links below. In the description, I have a link to my ebook. I teach workshops and seminars around the world, so you can learn from me in person at those. Let me know what else you want to see on this YouTube channel. I'll try to put out more action videos, some tutorials, some philosophical rants as well. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, comment, whatever. Visit my website, and I'll see you guys next time I make another one of these.